Okay.
Hello, Kristen.
Hi, Dave.
We're bringing the energy.
Yep. Rip-roaring good time.
Yeah. We're choicing down us. And we help founders who want to be healthy and aspirational in their founding journey do that.
Yeah. Well, we just talked about this. So founding something, being an entrepreneur is intense. And there's like so many ways that you can not take care of yourself in the process. So taking care of yourself in the process of doing it, which goes beyond just the business and the entrepreneur side of it. Like that's our thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a little bit like we're founders and entrepreneurs and we help founders and entrepreneurs. So
found an entrepreneur.
It's like it's a circle, a virtuous cycle.
Yeah. This is The Clearing, and today we're talking about reality distortion fields.
Yeah, reality distortion fields.
And how they happen and how they fall apart and what you do and what it feels like.
Yeah, so what is it? It's a weird name.
Yeah, it comes from, I think there was an Apple employee that described Steve Jobs' like charismatic field that he created in the early days of Apple.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And effectively, I haven't looked into it deeply, but my sense of it is it's basically a founder or a leader of a type creates a field of possibility that people sort of believe into. And it's a way of projecting a future reality into the world. And there's something of a belief system involved. Usually it comes from like a visionary or something like this.
Yeah. I mean, sure, Steve Jobs, like the way that I think about it and the way that it shows up in my work is if I'm trying to bring something new into the world that doesn't exist yet, I have to go inhabit this future space of, okay, I live in a world where my thing does exist. What is it like? Yeah. So it's like kind of like a speculative fiction sort of thing. And then there's a few things here. So part of it is like going into that like future mind space and like you're inhabiting it a bit so you can pick up all the details and like bring it back to like now. The trick is you have to bring it back to now and you still need a relationship with reality in the here and now because like no one else is there with you is part of the thing. So it could be a little bit isolating sometimes if you're not careful.
This is the health of your distortion field.
Yeah.
Like how real it is. Because depending on how far away the future is and how probable or adjacently possible the future is, you're going to run into having to stay in fantasy longer. So like say in the case of like researching cold fusion or something like this, like it's a 70-year project, and it's super R&D or something like this. Like something that's closer to hand, like any project has some capacity, like has some distortion field. It's necessary to project it into the future. That's the project part. What can happen is in the process of doing this, either in a team or by yourself or in a company, there can be a sense of the field. I think I'm very oriented towards the charisma part of the thing right now, mostly because
you've got a bit of it.
Well, I had a problem with it recently, so like it feels so real. And
it's believable.
It's believable, and that you can create narratives and other people can buy into them, right? But what is the quality of the buy-in, right? Yeah. Is it a buy-in that is like people are putting things like their time and effort, or in the case of customers, like money on the line, or is it we want to all believe this, and it's like for instance
it's a bit kumbaya.
It can be, right?
Well, you can create like an alternative fictional world a bit to live in, and sometimes like that's the glamoring charisma thing where people want to believe it and they want it to be true. And but how does that translate? Like how are they joining you in making that a reality? And like your job, like my job as the entrepreneur, is to invite people into that world and help participate in growing it. Because if they're not helping grow it, and it's just me holding it up, like that's not sustainable, obviously.
No, I mean,
then they're like, it's almost like they're not really in it with you then, if they're not helping you build it. And like helping build it, meaning
that can mean a bunch of different things.
They could be part of the team, they could be a customer, but like actually part of the vision coming to life, like to fruition.
This in the entrepreneurial sense, like it is a business coming into being, and like all of the things that make that viable. In the case of like a fictional universe, it's people buying into the characters and the lore and all of these kinds of things. Sure. Like in the case of a meme verse, which you were talking about, like we were talking about before, it's people buying into and participating in the meme, like in a social media context or something like this.
Yeah. So, I mean, this like on TikTok, this is like super obvious. Like it's cool if you think about creators in the sense of them being entrepreneurs and then their product is memes, and particularly in TikTok. And you have your own brand of how you want to craft the memes and how you want to share them. And like the distribution is built into the social network. But yeah, you're inviting people to join in. And like the whole thing with TikTok is you're trying to get the meme to go viral. And yeah, it's fascinating watching it come through. So there was like a meme recently where everyone agreed to this reality. This TikTok creator had this like line about how she wasn't like the other girls. She was very demure, very mindful, very cutesy. And I mean, even just saying it, like Dave's always like, it's literally a tick. Like it sounds like a tick. And people have been using this line like everywhere. So it's just been fascinating to watch how the creator has been like running with it. And then it's turned into, I think, a whole slew of brand deals. And so the long and the short of it is, and the creator themselves is like super overwhelmed because I think this is just like some person making TikToks, and then all of a sudden the entire world's like spotlight is on them. And in that context, the Reality Distortion Field of very demure, very mindful, which was like the brainchild of one person, everyone agreed to the reality, everyone bought in, everyone started participating, and it became real. It was like the product is in the world. And in this sense, like it doesn't always happen like this, but it's a business. Like there's money coming through the pipes.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's sustainable, like that. Well, I think this is a different, like there's different kinds of entrepreneurism and different kinds of products. And this one has like memes, just generally speaking, are very fast. Some of them, this one has a little bit of a longer shelf life because it like hit the sweet spot, but
I mean, the shelf life is measured in months at most.
At most.
At most. Yeah. So I think the sense that's interesting there, one, the people agree to the reality, they participate the reality into being, and at a certain point, the reality starts to fade, or it drops off, or it collapses, or whatever it is. This one in particular is a bunch of people who are agreeing. Yep. So like as long as the people like participate in it, play in the thing, it stays alive to some degree, and it forks and it moves off into other kinds of things. In the case of a business, like there are structural like ways of participating that make it real. Like, is there money coming in because you were offering value or utility in some sense, right? The distortion field in the early days of the founding thing is it's part of the startup mentality that you need to bring to it.
Yes.
And that's where it's like most pernicious because like
how so?
To believe like it's where it is the most levered and risky, basically. Like and the downsides are most pernicious there. Because like as the founder or the founding team,
are you in La La Land, basically?
You have to be in La La Land to some degree, but can you step out of La La Land? Do you have practices to test your La La Landing? And also that what happens in the founding community is we are all supporting our La La Lands because we have to, because it's such an incredibly insane thing to do to bring something into being, and it doesn't work all the time. No. So you have to.
Often it doesn't work either.
So you have to cultivate the idea that mine makes sense, right? And the practice of making it make sense is going to people and getting them to agree to it or test it, and accountability and all this kind of thing. So in the case of the memeplex, like, or a meme like this, there's a drop off, and it'd be interesting to know what it feels like for the creator to have this thing that they've made the world, and then the world is like no longer viable in that sense.
Yeah.
I know what it feels like from the perspective of being a founder or an entrepreneur, and it's tough. It hurts.
Yeah.
So yeah, mitigating that and like working with the coming in and out of that field, and making that a practice, I think is part of what we're leaning into.
Yeah, I'm curious, for Carbon Made, was there a distortion field around it, like up until when you left? Like, do you maintain it? Like, because even like 15 years in after founding, bootstrapping something, like, does it, and then like a lot of people agree to it, the business is like financially viable, is there still a distortion field? And then because you ended up exiting in the way that you did, did it feel like the distortion field was falling then?
I think that, like, at the outer edge of any, I mean, you can get into the philosophy of anything, right? Like, sure, anything that is socially constructed and agreed upon in culture or whatever is a type of distortion field, right?
Yeah.
But for the purposes of this, like, the distortion field matures through its phases. So in the earliest days where it's unproven, like, you have yourself and whoever's around you, and then your early customers or whoever agree to the thing.
Yep.
And those people are so important to, like, keep you encouraged and validated. As it goes into like a wider spread, now you have other people propping it up. They wish it to exist, yep, because they want the utility, they want the service, they like the thing to exist in an entertainment sense, whatever it is.
Yep.
Then it moves into like more of a maintenance thing. People just, like, a lot of the time they'll come and like, I remember having this feeling, like, early days, I wasn't really aware of this. We were just doing it, mm-hmm, and then it happened, mm-hmm, and then, like, okay, cool. And then people were telling me that it was a thing. And I'm like, oh, that's wild. And then there was this movement towards, it's always been there for people, like, because most people don't know how things,
before Carbon Made, yeah.
Well, they don't know how things come to be most often, because a lot of people aren't around, like, taking something from zero or from before zero. Later on in the process, there was a necessity to grow and to adapt, and that's always there. Like, taking care of that, like, to move into new lines of business, to grow the company, to expand or to shift, like, orientation in relationship to reality. It comes back, but it's different than the very early days founding, and a lot of large scale companies, they tend not to do well with this. They, like, get rigid, and, like, this is why they stop innovating, and the distortion field turns into something else, which is like,
I don't know what that is.
Elderliness or something.
Yeah, it's calcified in a way, and there's just, like, I guess in that context, the path is set out, the game board is set, kind of thing, and then you just move through it. So I have more experience than you do with that. And I did run into problems having, like, this entrepreneur sensibility to me, where I just have this, like, one story from IBM where I was doing government consulting, and there's, like, a bunch of different divisions in IBM, though. And the work that I was doing was around older adults, people with disabilities. And that gets into home modifications, and, like, there's government programs with that. And there's a bunch of stuff there. So I don't even know how I came across him. If I, like, searched, like, the directory or whatever, and found this guy who was working, I found a couple people. One guy who was just, like, an R&D sort of scientist who was working in some sort of, like, disability, materiality, blah, blah, blah. And then a woman who was working in, like, the actual physical space, like, architecting spaces for people, like, that afforded a kind of accessibility. And the response, like, I was like, oh, this is cool. We can all work together. We could, like, do cross, like, he knows things that I don't. She knows things that I don't. They aren't talking yet. I found them and like I go and like talk to them and like it's exciting. And then the reflection I got from my boss, who's super cool, was just like, you're more than like welcome to do this, but you have to keep in mind, like, how are you going to bill for your time? Yeah. And there's no budget for doing this kind. And I'm like, and in my mind, I've started a distortion field. I'm like, okay, so if the three of us can get together and then we could be, and I'm like, this is really cool. And then we're doing something that no other consulting group has because we're leveraged by like all of these different like amenities and people in IBM. And then it just, there's no, in there, I don't even know where these people are. They're out somewhere. Like, it was, that was hard for me. And that was sort of, you know, in hindsight, the beginning of the end, where it's just like, I can't be here. Like, I can't, like, I don't know. Like, it's hard. It was hard for me.
Yeah. Like, there are certain environments that support this and don't. Like, I had an early experience of it, like a very early experience with this, like working for the school district.
Oh, yeah.
In, just
a quick note though, like, I don't know, IBM maybe because there's so much infrastructure in the world that IBM runs on in schools. Like, there are certain things, this is pace layers, that don't need to be constantly innovating. And so there's some amount of, okay, that's a good thing that they're doing that. And that there's people who are like, I want to work in that way. So not everything needs to be all distortion field all the time.
I mean, there are different paces of the distortion field.
Yeah.
Like a steady state distortion field at IBM, like might or might not be good for the world, might or not be good for a reality that we wish to live in, but it's steady state because there's a lot of structures that keep it going.
Yep.
So, anyway. And for the people who are working there, they would like that to continue. And so they pay their energy into that distortion field. So, anyway, basically the story is in relationship to what you were talking about, like
the story,
the orientation I had to innovation and like pulling together technologies and and like bringing something into being that didn't exist anymore, was not suited to the environment of like the graphic design department at the school district in Las Vegas. And I had a boss who at the time, and I was like 17 or something like this. And I'm like, we can fix this and we can do that. And this is going to, all of these kinds of things, great ideas. And she came to me and she's like, you have to chill. Like this environment is like, I love it. It's good. But also like the PTA, if you launch any of these things, will be breathing down our neck, wondering why you're spending all of their children's money on like whatever fancy design thing you're trying to do. And so to me, I didn't understand like the
context of that.
Yeah. Before I didn't understand that there are different types of energies to be brought into particular places and spaces.
Context. Yeah.
Yeah. So and so in the case that you were describing, like the context didn't bear the like entrepreneurial energy.
There wasn't a good fit there. Yeah.
There's the possibility that if it were possible to build time and you had an R&D budget and all of that kind of thing. So I think what's important there is the sense of like billing time. Like that's still, it is extra necessary, like to establish your distortion field into a reality, like outside of the environment. You have to structure it yourself and get the world to agree to it. And so like figuring out
how you're spending your time within the distortion
accounting
field.
For your time. And so this is a good segue into like how we landed in this topic at all.
Just a quick note there, something you said earlier, like caught my attention. And I don't know that we've talked about this, but distortion fields, I feel like in the entrepreneurial sense, feel like they're a good place to make a clearing, to create space to grow or develop something that hasn't already existed. And in order, like, you have to carve out like space in the world, in your mind, even like, where does this go? Where do I fit it? So it's a bit of like world building. And we've been kind of using the word world. So that's just interesting. And I just wanted to lob it out and you might be able to run with it. But I think this, because when you were talking about carbon made, and even in our own work, we've done a lot of different projects and a lot of different styles of projects, and even like lineages within projects. When there's a fork, or we're adding something new in, or maybe a new team member joins, or even like a new client, like every time something new happens, there's like the distortion field might shift, especially when it's new. So you're curating and crafting space for that thing to exist until it has more of its own like identity structure. And it takes years and years and years and iteration to get to the point of like an IBM or a school district or anything like that.
Yeah.
But you are looking for a little bit of stability, not like the furniture's bolted down kind of thing, but just, we have a chair now. That's
Depends
great.
on what your long-term goals are, but yeah, like.
But you can't jump to that. Like,
you can try, it won't work.
Distortion Field, I don't know, like the starting point feels almost like it's just a very potent in the sense of potential arena, but there's nothing really there yet. And then at the point in time, you can like get enough stability that you can go in, and maybe this can tie back into having rituals and having like check-ins and having techniques and accounting and like all of that. Where when you enter the distortion field, or if you're just living there, like you're like, okay, this is over here. It's an orientation to this clearing that you've made, and making it into a place. I'm like almost like making it into a home. I mean, you do live there a little.
I mean, yeah, it's a shared place though.
Yeah.
Like a home, unless it's a group home, a joint. I mean, this thing is a business is different in that sense, because you have people coming through that are not necessarily living there, right? Like,
no.
And so cultivating that sensibility that like, customers are part of the thing that instantiates the reality. So like, or solidifies the reality in the way that you're talking about. So like I'm just feeling into the carving out versus, because like there are cases in which there's a visionary that has a sense of a way the world can be, and it isn't legibilized really well.
Sure.
And the component pieces of it aren't legibilized, and there might not even be a market for it.
Yeah.
Right. And so in that case, like there's a lot of work in getting the world to agree to the idea that there is a place of value there. Because it's pre-existing. Like there's almost a sense that like there's latent potential or nascent potential that hasn't been like tapped into yet.
This is more R&D innovation is like I'm feeling into there.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. In that case, like that is the most risky, and like usually you get venture money and like you have to get a lot of things to line up to have that reality. You can feel that as carving, right? I feel it as clearing, like, and the clearing is like clearing up people's sensibility to see what's already there. Because like that's how I feel. There is a sense of coming into like an entrepreneurial sensibility. Like founders typically, or how I've experienced founders, have this thing that like the world is in such a way and it's irritating because something needs to be solved. And either they have a sensitivity for a large group of people, like usually, or they're carrying that sensitivity themselves, and it can be extrapolated out into a bunch of people. And if we could only serve that irritation, like that problem, then all of a sudden, like there is something that exists. So like that's the clearing, like clearly seeing it. I think if you're doing I'm being pedantic about the carving versus like, tending or sensitizing or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even remember where I said carving.
It's just
carving out the space. Yeah,
carving out the space or creating the place or I think like, and it's to create a stability. Like the way that I feel that is like inviting other people into the clearing having them agree to it through some action, and then now the thing is stabilized. And like your point in the IBM example, like it took them 100 plus years or whatever to get to the place that they are now.
Sure.
In the early days, it's small acts that are compounding, right? Small acts of like telling the story of having products and services that you can sell into, all these kinds of things.
Yeah, there's two distinct things happening here. So one is the place that you are working as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And you have team members that come in. Maybe it's co-founders, maybe it's staff, maybe it's this, that, and the other, like people that you're hiring or are collaborators.
Yeah.
So like the work environment. And that to me feels like a carving out of like, I need to make room for this in my life in a certain way. And it's
so like accounting for it.
Yeah. And just intentionally, like you have the control of setting up how you work and like how you design your orientation to the distortion field, as opposed to, or in relationship then to, so that's like phase one. Like you need to do that, like bare minimum for yourself. And then going out into the world to invite other people as customers in, it's like, you're not inviting them into your home per se. You're inviting them into the storefront that's in the front, or maybe you're inviting them into the living room, but you're not inviting them into the workshop. Or, I mean,
there is a movement now, like, working with the doors open and stuff like this. But
sure,
generally speaking, yes, they're not living there with you.
And
they're not
that's
inhabiting
different.
it with you.
I mean, it makes sense that you would gravitate towards that because you have an eye towards market and sales and copy.
That's what I was just feeling into.
And that's what you're like. I tend to be more operational and like behind the scenes, and like I'm org design like centric. So yeah, but for people to see the product of what you're working on in that workshop, like, yeah, what do you need to clear? How do you need to make it easier for them to see? And that is one.
Yeah. So the thing that's popping up here is like maintaining your distortion field and tending it and growing it, like is a process of internal work, like personally, individually, and also in the team context. Like what is the ground in which you are like bringing this thing into what kinds of rituals and practices, and
what are you agreeing to?
And how are you accounting for your time, and how are you getting accountability then from the outside world, right? Both from people who are looking after your individual, like inner work and this kind of thing, and your external, like your outer work. That being something from the individual standpoint and from the company endeavor. So I think we ran into a little bit of a I in particular ran into a little bit of like isolating tendency where I wasn't getting accountability, and then we were starting to move into the world and got like and this can happen when there's a drift between reality and the distortion.
Yeah.
Right. Like trying to keep those harmonized to some degree it's a balancing act because you're projecting into the future, but you're trying to project into a future that's adjacently possible.
Yes.
Right. Like
you always have to bring it back to, because like most people, the customers that you're serving, for most entrepreneurs, they're not living out there.
No, so you're bringing the future to them.
Yes. Yeah. So this is the way of de-risking the entrepreneurship is to be in relationship with your audience or your customers like as early as possible. And I don't know, like this came up when we were talking about this episode, Seth Godin and his sort of style of, I forget like how exactly he frames it. His is like a sales funnel of
permission marketing.
Yeah, permission marketing. Yeah. It is like increasing the depth of relationship with your market, with your audience, by starting with something as simple as an email and then going through increasing like gates of asking permission and asking them to join you. And then, whatever your end product is like the goal to sell them on that. And certain people, it will take longer. Certain people just go all the way down. They're like, sign me up right now. Yeah. So even in the beginning though, like a part of me, like reverse engineers, okay, how do you get to that? And so I think the easiest way to get to that is to follow the path from the top of the funnel. Start at the top of the funnel, ask people for permission
Yeah.
in the beginning through content, through things that maybe are free, start to build an audience, and then start offering like small offerings into that. Like don't jump to like the big kahuna, because the amount of time it takes to create that full-fledged like full product, you're like, and then you're just, this is the isolation thing. You're hanging out in your workshop in the delusion field, and maybe you've got a team there even, but you are not talking to the people who might be using this. How do you even know like what they're like, how much do you have to clear for them to understand? And then you're like, and it will cost you some big amount, and they're like, I don't even know if
the
I can
relationship
do this.
can't bear it.
Yeah.
Like
you got to build trust. This is like the Seth Godin thing. That's part of you're showing up and telling them that like, I will be doing this. Like I'm showing you through small ways, like the newsletter. I'm showing you. Yeah. So just this incremental thing.
There is also the internal work of this too. Like in the practice of doing this, you're showing up with yourself.
Yes.
And like you're not like over doing everything in isolation, tossing it out into the world, and then having the world be like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Because what happens there then is like you go into crisis.
Totally.
And like because you're way over levered on like where you are in relationship to reality.
Yep.
So it's much better to slow grow, be like develop healthy relationships with yourself and the work and the people that are like supporting the work. And then when it comes time to, because inevitably you will run into one of these things, like either because you have something operating in shadow or you just like through ignorance of like not ever being able to know how all of reality works, because that's impossible.
Yeah.
You will just get waylaid by something. Something will just fucking come out of nowhere and like sideswipe you. And depending on how well you're taking care of yourself and your relationship to reality, you will bounce back from that quickly and adapt to how it is and move into, you can process the feelings that come with this, and they can be extremely potent. So this is the sort of emotional resilience thing.
Yeah. This is the, like what I was talking about, like the felt sense of creating a kind of home in the distortion field for you as the like entrepreneur, because that's your sort of like place of work. And like, this is figurative, right? It's not literal. Like it's not your workshop, but the workshop, like the studio.
It's a safe base, like a safe base to jump off from. Like,
yeah. Well, what the point I'm trying to make is that it's not like a physical thing where you can like be like, hey, come into my distortion field. Let me open the door for you into like, we have a studio in the backyard. But that place does, like, for us, symbolize something. So, like, when we walk through the space, like, we're like, okay, we're going into the work mindset because we have rituals here, things that we do here. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. The thing that's sparking in me, and maybe your train of thought will come back, is like, so, like, tending, this is, and I think this is what we're interested in, like, a lot. I had a really difficult time like tending all of this in my first businesses. Like didn't know that being conscious of this was necessary. Like there were some unconscious healthy behaviors and a lot of unconscious unhealthy behaviors. And so later now, like we have spent a lot of time like bringing this stuff into consciousness and learning how to tend it in a way that allows us to jump off and do risky things. This is something that we hope to provide to other people, because it's so vitally important to staying healthy while you do this.
Yeah.
And the likelihood that you're going to output healthy like product and service for other people if you are taking care of this kind of thing.
Totally.
And you can scale in a way your business and your relationships.
It's just more sustainable.
Significantly
for
more.
Your own like body as a vessel of doing this work.
You can go further. You can do things of higher complexity. You can hold more intensity if you are looking to the balance of accounting for your time, accounting for your reality distortion field, all of these kinds of things. And so, yeah, I mean, this is the nature of these practices and rituals and they're not all the same, right? But when you were talking about the home or the studio or something like this, like it lives kind of in that in that orientation to being in relationship to the founding journey or something like this. I don't know if that sparked where you were going.
No, but that's okay. I just can put it down. So rituals and practices, like what are we talking about here?
I think if we orient it to just specifically the reality distortion field, like tending that, what came up is like this particular week, we were kind of looking at budgeting stuff and like, runway kinds of things. And we weren't tending to that in the way that was going to keep us sharp. Mm-hmm. And so like this one is a very straightforward, like checking in with your runway and how it relates to your initiatives and how you're bringing those into being. Yep. Now those are like basic accounting practices, and it's a skill, and it takes like setting aside time to pay attention and you are stepping out of the reality distortion field of the idea and the narrative and all this kind of thing. And you're moving into numerical reality, right? And that balancing act is a fundamental skill of business. Like if they're not balanced, one of them is going to, take you off course and sort of drive you into a ditch. There is also an accounting for your time. Yeah. And we're moving into a phase where, we're starting to, we've talked about this, creating like particular cycles and like taking those cycles into account with your runway and what your objectives are and how you wish to be growing particularly. And like goal setting. Yeah. Totally. And then having that goal setting being in relationship to doing things that are scary. Yep. Like moving out into the world where there's uncertainty, so you can check your narrative, you can check your sales stuff.
Yeah, and then we talked about accountability outside of your, so finding accountability outside of us. Mm-hmm. In this case, it depends on what it is. In this case, we're just business, entrepreneur check-in. So we've been talking about it, looking into mastermind groups just to see or some other kind of potentially in-person space that we can join and other people doing this work. So, and one of the things you pointed out earlier that I enjoyed was getting to learn from other people just by dint of sharing your journey. And I learn really well like that. So just being in relationship with other entrepreneurs in this way, which is kind of, I don't know if the word is ironic, but that is something that we are looking to work towards in our offering, because it's so hard to do this alone. So if there was a place that you could show up so you can practice these things and put the time in and be witnessed and be in partnership and be working through things with people that are not your business partner. Yeah. It's so important.
Yeah. I mean, because we have a fair bit of practice and energy in structuring this stuff. Yeah. And great. And it's taken years and years and years of practice to get to this point. Yeah. Holding it for yourself is so fucking hard on top of having to do all of the other things.
I honestly, just thinking about that, the years and years and years, just how much of our time we have spent holding the space for other people, and kind of the blind spot here, because we've been talking a bit about blind spot. So, because we had a bit of a break in the delusion field, and it was kind of not shocking, but it was just how did we not see this? So there was a bit of self-deception, and I think I'm going to put a pin in the self-deception. But I lost my train of thought again. I'm tired.
It's been a bumpy week.
I didn't sleep well the last 2 nights, so I'm on the second morning of just being I think, all right, how can I sustain this?
I think we can wrap up here, and by talking about, go ahead.
We've been holding space for other people, so we need to look now for space where we can be held. And I think that is potentially one of the biggest, not challenges, just asking for help and going to get help, which is a thing that we see oftentimes in entrepreneurs and founders. I could do it myself, especially bootstrap entrepreneurs and founders.
So, I fall into this. I mean, this week I had a conversation with my coach, about this exact thing. And he sort of framed it as like self-reliance versus self-efficacy.
Yes.
And like self-reliance being this like tendency to think that you have to do everything by yourself, by your single self, and that you're not connected, and there aren't people around, and if you don't do it that way, like you can't trust other people, all of this thing, which is an isolating tendency, which again, it has its merits, and like it produces agency in a particular kind of way, and all this kind of thing. But when you are doing something that is really intense, like the reliance on a safe base and a community, and
there are
all
parts of yourself that you're not going to be able to see.
Totally.
And that is because of, like you mentioned earlier, shadow, like something that
you need other people to reflect that stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And this is also where our kind of brand and philosophy around having these different dimensions of being a founder.
Yeah.
We were over-indexed, and like we've talked about this. It's like sort of like a portfolio, and keeping the portfolio balanced based on the context of like what's going on in the world. We needed to shift more into awareness and intention and attention into some of the like business and finance side of what we're doing, which we're doing that now. But we hadn't been, and it was a bit of a blind spot. So having people like, I don't know, practices and people to reflect so you can see what you might not be missing. And sometimes that could be a coach. Sometimes it can be like a group. So there's like different ways that this shows up, and you begin to notice like, so the thing that we've been kind of bandying about is when you don't see it and you've like tricked yourself, which is kind of a funny thing because it's just everything's contextual. So if you learn where your blind spots are, and like, let's say spirituality, and then you work with those same blind spots don't map over into business, let's say, or into like social relationships, like one-to-one, but they tend to have similar patterns. And they have like similar felt sense. So part of the like meta work, and this is something that we've been studying and practicing for the past few years, is just noticing those patterns. I don't know. And not being too hard on yourself when things are not working well because you neglected a part of you as a founder, or you didn't see something coming. And like you mentioned earlier, like it's going to happen. You're even the most seasoned like entrepreneurs, even the most seasoned whatever. Like you are always outcomes.
Like sort of trying to grow. This is part of the entrepreneurial path, like being a path of personal development. Like, if you were taking that seriously, and you know, we tend toward this orientation, it means that you are pushing out across whatever areas of development that are calling to you, so that you can push that back into services and offerings for other people. It's a style of service. That means that you are going to run into blind spots. Is the whole point of the thing, right? Like, so anyways, I think we can land the plane here.
I think this is good timing.
I don't know. Do we have any asks? Do we have any, what else do we got?
I mean, just as usual, we're curious if you're watching on YouTube, if you've had experiences with this like concept of the delusion field, maybe, or distortion field, if you call it that, if you call it something else, and like what your experience has been. And I don't know if any of this resonates. We would love to chat.
I think we'll also start doing accountability things. We're going to start pushing things out more. Like right now, we have not been like sort of spreading the word on our work as much. We've been just sort of getting into the habit of externalizing what we've been up to. So we're trying to push out and like talk to more people. We're doing this interview tour right now. It's at choicingdown.com/interview. We'll link it up in the show notes. I'm going to start posting on LinkedIn, which is weird. We're just getting it going. So send us good vibes on that, and we're sending you good vibes on whatever you're trying to do.
I'm not prepared with my list of accountabilities, but I think I'll be posting on LinkedIn too. I want to join, I think, a local mastermind group or some other kind of group to talk about like some of these accountability things. because I'm social. So I would like to meet people. And if it could be women entrepreneurs, even better.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye.